as always, what we need to do with this is to import our OVA file. Okay, I am sharing the wrong window, so let's try that again. Much better. Okay, so as always, what we want to do is, first off, at some point we are going to need Kali. So if you haven't done so, please feel free to start Kali at this point. Okay, we will let Kali work its way to starting. The second thing, of course, we need to do is to import this OVA file. This is a pretty straightforward, hopefully most of you have done this. Sorry, I apologize for that interference, but there's a way of doing what's called an expert mode import of Kali, of VMs in VirtualBox, and that's what this is. This is handy if you want to import a VM, but you don't want to store it on your main folder. Like all of my virtual machines get stored in this folder right here, right? If you want to use your D drive for whatever reason, then you want to go into expert mode and start specifying the different directories. For today's class, however, the guided mode will be fine. As always, we select the OVA file that I asked you to download. It is the K3 OVA file. Open that, click on Next, and there really aren't any issues with this. If you try changing the base folder right here, my experiences with the guided mode is that changing it here doesn't work. If you want to change the destination, you actually have to use the expert mode. So we're going to import that OVA. It should be quite quick, assuming I do not run out of space. Awesome. And once it is imported, you can, of course, check your settings. We should always be checking our settings just to make sure everything is fine. 1 gig of memory is lots. 16 meg of video RAM is fine. It's a text-only server, so that's going to be fine. Storage we really don't need to worry about. It's about 2 gig in actual size. That's something you need to be aware of. We have no warnings here, so we don't have to make any repairs. If there was anything, for example, if it said something like this, invalid settings, we would have to go in and fix that invalid setting. Fortunately, when we import this, we do not have any problems. Okay? The one thing we always want to verify, of course, is our network settings. And I believe when I exported this OVA file, it was proper for what we need, but we should check it anyway. We only have one adapter. It is on our host-only network. You specify your host network name and set promiscuous mode to allow all. If you've had to make changes, click on OK or click on Cancel as necessary and start your VM. Okay. Again, if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to let me know. And again, if your connection drops and it's an ongoing problem, because I only have, I think, about half the class dialed in, so it's quite possible that the WebEx connection issues are quite widespread this morning. Okay, so when we fire up our K3 server, we don't get much of an indication other than it is Ubuntu server, so it is a Debian-based server. That's handy, but we don't get anything like we saw when we fired up our when we fired up our Metasploitable VM. Okay, so we are going to have to run an analysis. As always, we log in to Kali with root. That may change in the future. New versions of Kali have a dedicated Kali user pre-configured, but for now I want you to just use root and the root password you set up. Make sure I have my supporting documentation, but as always, keep in mind the way we are going to attack this site. Okay? We are going to be going from Kali to K3 over the host network. There is some little quirky gotchas on this one, but we'll deal with them as they pop up. Once you have Kali up and running, please start a terminal at this time. Control-Alt-T will actually start a terminal, and Control-Shift-T will open up new tabs. I believe we will need a couple of tabs for today's activity. As always, verify that our network is configured properly for both NAT and our host-only network. My host-only network is a 56. So we can target that 56.0/24, and of course the target is going to be the nmap command. Once we run nmap, as we have done time and time again, it will give us a list of VMs that it discovers running. And we have one right here, 178. As always, we must understand our environment. 56.1 is the gateway address for this network. Sorry, just moving something out of the way. 56.1 is the gateway address. 56.100 is our DHCP server. We just saw 56.146 is the IP address that we are attacking from. And because it is the bottom in the list, that is usually an indicator that this is our Kali VM. That leaves this IP unassigned, so let us focus our target on it. And double click and paste is your friend. And we really don't get much extra information here. We really don't get a lot of extra OS information other than what we saw over here. We get OpenSSH, which we are going to use, and we get Apache. We don't get much more. Now, if you're following along with the notes, you will see at the top of page 2, when we were given this VM, we were given specific instructions on configuring its use in our pen testing activities. And the person who gave it to us said we really need to configure so that this machine, when we are attacking it, we actually need to attack it by its domain name for whatever reason. Okay? To be honest, I'm not doing all the different vectors of attack on this VM, but nevertheless, we were given instructions to configure it to use a domain name rather than an IP when we are targeting it. So we're going to do that. We will delve into this when we talk about it a little bit further, but for now, that's just what we're going to focus on. Now, in the instructions, it tells you how to modify the hosts file in Windows, but of course we're using Linux for our attack, so we need to modify the etc hosts files, and I'm going to do that with the nano command. I do not have to worry. I'm going to go over to my second window and modify it here just to get into the good discipline. So nano/etc/hosts is the file we are targeting. Okay? Right now, again, we are telling Kali where to find this new machine. This new machine. Damn it, I did the clear command, and I should not have done that. Okay. Yeah, I screwed up. That's one of the problems with doing the clear command that you should always avoid. 192.168.56.174, I believe it was. No. Let's just scan the network again. Sorry, I've dropped the information by typing in the clear command. One of the problems with the clear command is it also clears some recent commands. 178, that's the address I was looking for. And this is why we do multiple windows, just so that you can do that kind of management. Okay, so the IP address we want to configure Kioptrix3.com to resolve to is the IP address for this K3 server that we discovered. So we modify this by going into our hosts file. Again, you can see the file name right here. Okay, and we need to specify that IP address. You can right click and copy the selection and go over here, right click and paste what's in the clipboard. But again, because we have the double click and paste option, if I simply double click on that IP address, go over and use my middle mouse button, because it is still in a terminal session that it understands, it will copy and paste with double click and middle mouse button. Couple of spaces, and the instructions said that we want to resolve Kioptrix3.com to that IP address. We can give it another name. We can call it Kioptrix3, but that wasn't in the instructions. I talked about that in the handout, but that really wasn't in the instructions, so that's fine. As always, with what is this, nano? Control O to write out and Control X to exit. So I'm going to hit Control O. It's going to recommend the file name. That is, of course, fine. Enter, and then Control X. And then the real test that this has worked properly is that you can now do, as you see on the handout, I think it's near the bottom, the top of page 2. Sorry, correction, page 3 of the handout. Now that we have modified this file, we can go back to our Scans tab. I'm renaming it so that I can easily find it. And I've discovered web, I've discovered SSH. I am going to, as always, do a dirb scan, and I can do http:// I could use the IP address 192.168.56.178. However, why don't I just simply type in Kioptrix3.com, and it starts our scan, which is very promising. Okay? If you do this wrong, please be advised, and this is very important, and I'll just quickly mention, we're seeing some interesting results. phpMyAdmin, interesting. If you type this in wrong, you will not be doing a scan of a local server. You will be doing a scan of a real online server called Kioptrix3.com. I think somebody added it after this attack came out a while ago, but it's a little frightening. So when we do the Nikto scan, it actually is a little bit better in this case, because not only does it scan the site for us, but you can see up here, well, it's scrolled by, but we'll go to it in a sec. Again, we get indications of phpMyAdmin. phpMyAdmin is running. We're going to take advantage of that later on. Okay? Again, phpMyAdmin was found. But what I like most about running the Nikto command is that it says right here, we have resolved the K3 server to our internal host-only network address. I like that, and ensures that I did my configuration properly. It's a very handy feature. Any questions? If you have a question, type it in. Otherwise, I'm going to move on to the next phase of the attack. Okay? I go through. No questions? Awesome. I go through, I don't see anything other than phpMyAdmin seems to be installed. We can take advantage of that going forward, but that gives me a pretty clear indication that some kind of a web application is installed. Let's take a look at it. going to launch my browser. With my browser, I'm going to go to Kioptrix3.com, and right away I get a website that says "Got security. We are revamping the new gallery CMS we made." Interesting. I hope you didn't hear that. I'm getting emails while I'm doing my lecture. Always my favorite thing. Okay. I'm checking emails just because I'm expecting students to be struggling with connections. Normally I wouldn't bother, but today is an exception. Back to our activity. There is a login page. We always like login pages, so let's take a look at this. There's a username, password. We could definitely start targeting this with SQL injections and see what's going on. But we're looking for clues. We're always looking for clues. And just a sanity check, we haven't done this CMS before, this pen test before, have we? I'm looking for answers in chat. This is the first time you're seeing the Lotus CMS attack? Perfect, thank you. I thought so as well. I was doing a sanity check though. Okay, so we've got this thing called Lotus CMS. Well, that's interesting, what's that? And when we click on it, it says, fork me on GitHub, Lotus, June 2012, unstable. Wow. You know, we are going to definitely take a look at this initially. So let's do that. Let us open up a new tab and research Lotus CMS, and one of the first things that comes up in our Google search is exploit. So of course, we're going to click on that. Lotus CMS 3.0 eval remote command execution. We like remote command executions. We click on it, it takes us to the Rapid7 site, which means if there is a module we can leverage, they will reference it and look at it. It is right there. So this site gives us an attack that we can use. Now I don't like this information. They don't delve into it enough. This is good, but it doesn't really give me what I'm looking for. What I want to use in better representation of the attack we're doing today is at the bottom of page 3 of the supporting Word document, where not only do we use this exploit identified here in our research, but we also use a payload. We're going to launch another reverse shell using the Metasploit framework. We are going to launch a listener, and we are going to see if we can't take advantage of this. Okay? Actually, no, we don't use a listener. It has a built-in, we don't have to worry about the listener. It's built into the module. Okay? So let's do that. Here's my scans. Here's my nano. I'm done with that. This might be a good place to launch my MSF console, just to see if I can't take advantage of this exploit right here. Oh, look at that. My Little Pony. Isn't that just nauseating this early in the morning? Okay. Well, it's what we have. It's what we have. So, we are going to use exploit multi. I'm going from the documentation HTTP, and it is LCMS, and as soon as I hit the tab after the LCMS, it finds the PHP remote shell execution. Okay, with this we can always do show options, but as I said before, we actually want to use a payload with this one. So we're going to set a payload of a generic, and it is shell reverse TCP. Tab again is your friend. So now when I do show options, we have a couple that we need to set. The ones that are identified as required must be set. The ones that are optional are the ones identified as no. We must set an R host. We must set a port. We saw in our scan that port 80 is fine. Where's a good example of that? Port 80 is identified here, and it was also identified in our network scans before. So that's fine. All right. We must identify a URI, a Uniform Resource Indicator, I believe is what the I stands for. And this is wrong. We saw back here that it's running off of the root of the website. It is not a subdirectory as identified here. So we need to set that correctly. And because we're using a payload, it is required to set a localhost value as well. Let us set those parameters at this time. Set our hosts, and that is going to be either the IP address or kioptrix3.com. Should be fine. As I said, the URI is incorrect, and it needs to be set to the document root of that server. And then finally, localhost is going to be set to my IP address, which I believe was 146. Okay, that's my IP address. Double click and paste. Looks good. Okay. Any questions? Alrighty. Now that we've done the following, we can run the exploit. And right away, we get that beautiful command shell session 1 opened. Perfect. As always, who am I? Data. We have successfully compromised this system. Unfortunately, it's not a root. It is merely a remote command execution that we leveraged by starting a remote shell. Hold, please. I hope you didn't hear that. My apologies if you did. Okay. Are there any questions? If you have them, please do not hesitate to type in the chat. Okay. So, we were able to do this remote execution. This is great. But what can we do with it? Okay, well, let's start looking for clues. We have a remote shell. Let's see what we can do. Normally, one of the things we always want to try and do is cat etc password. You can do this. You can try catting etc shadow, but it's not going to work because we simply do not have permissions to do this. Okay? And this is something you may want to take note of. It didn't actually return the error because the shell that is running is very bad. I don't have this in my notes, so I want you to use the following. Import pty, pty.spawn. Hopefully, no, that's wrong. Python -c single tick pawn open double ticks bin bash closing double ticks closing brackets closing single tick. I just sent a chat out to everyone. I think that's the command. I'm going to try it here. Python -c single tick import pty. I've typed this in like 1,000 times. I should have it memorized by now. pty.spawn. You're never sure if these are going to work. Bin bash closing double tick. No, that didn't work. Okay, we'll just have to accept it as is. All right. Because I mistyped it. Look at that. It didn't work because I mistyped it. Should work. If I'm not mistaken. There we go. Much better. Okay. So this does work. This command does work, and I have chatted out that command to you. And as it is clear, typos are not your friend. Okay? That wasn't a student emailing me. Very good. Okay, so also we get a better indication of errors, if there are any. Cat, for example, when I try to cat etc shadow, I will now get what the error was. So my shell is a little bit better. This is a nice feature to have, especially now that I'm going to start looking for clues. Normally, when we're trying to find information, we're looking for config files, all right? And that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do the find command. I'm going to look, because I am clearly at the document root of this application, this web application. I'm looking for anything with the name, with the string config in the name. And I always like to use the -print command, okay? And when I type that in, it gives me a couple of results. There's something called data config, and if this was a real attack, I would take a look at it. There's something called data modules blog, data config.txt. I don't know if that has any value to me, but I would check it out. But today we're going to focus on this file right here. This file called gallery gconfig.php. That's worth investigating. Another thing that we always want to look for is database connection strings, because we can then take a look and see if there's anything we can take advantage of. All right? We found a config file. Let us also look for connection strings. There's a couple of different standard configuration strings we can look for, but we're going to focus on the string MySQL_connect. You can see that on page 4 of the handout. You use the grep command. Again, this isn't in the handout, I apologize. We're looking from this point, grep-uppercase-R, and I'm looking for MySQL_connect. And if I could look for MySQLi_connect as well, or PDO would be another good thing to look for as well. And then you can try and find some connect information. It's going to look from this point recursively, and I want to look in all files. And when I type this in, again, the two commands that I typed in, well, let's do this. The first command I typed in was the find command, -name *config *-print. That was the first command I typed in. You should have that in your chat window or what have you. The second was grep-uppercase-R, and I am looking for this string MySQL_connect, and I'm looking in all files. So those were the two commands that I typed in. Hopefully you can capture those in your chat windows. Again, when I type in the grep command, it again points to this gallery, no, it's gfunctions, that's not the one, gconfig, the gallery gconfig file. The gallery gfunctions, that's interesting, but that's not as interesting as the gconfig file, which I also found up here. So the first thing I want to do is take a look at that file. If you have not done the shell, this next bit won't work. Changing into gallery, it doesn't work unless you do the this shell command. That's fine. You don't have to. You can, from this point, do cat, and I don't care. Gallery tab doesn't work. That's how much I use it. /gconfig.php. I am not in the gallery directory. If I was in the gallery directory, then I would just be cat gconfig.php. And before I hit enter, I really do need to apologize to everybody in this class, because the username is root, which is of course horrifying, but the password is especially juvenile. Every time I do this activity, I'm reminded that the hacker community is full of 14-year-old idiots. Nevertheless, this is the username and password of the database that we are using, the gallery database, which is, of course, horrifying. Not only that we were able to get the information, but most importantly, that they are connecting as root. as information security people, anytime you see any web application connecting as root, you should lose your shit all over the person that did it and call them out for their foolish mistake. In development is fine, but this has been rolled into production that we are attacking, and this is unacceptable. We could, now that we have set up a proper shell, now that we have a properly functioning shell, we could start MySQL from the command line with this username password combination and go into the gallery database. But we saw earlier that the PHP myadmin was installed. Let's take advantage of that. Kioptrix3.com/PHP myadmin. Just like that. And we know the username, and we know the password. I'm not saying it again. Right click, copy selection, go over, paste it in the password field, and log in. And lo and behold, we are logged in to this system as root. In theory, we would have access to all databases. What we have is the gallery database, and I'm seeing here the display really isn't that good, so let's make this a little bit more legible for everybody. Okay, so I'm zooming in just so you can see what's happening here along the side. There are some users here, but this is related to something called Gallerific, which looks like what the G-Gallery thing may have had to do with. When I click on that and I take a look at the data, we really only have one user in this system. I don't even know what that is, but someone's idea of, that doesn't look like it's been hashed. I'm not sure exactly what that is, but maybe it is some kind of an encryption, but that looks like an admin ID for this application. That really doesn't help me. What does interest me is this dev accounts. When I take a look at dev accounts and I take a look at the data that we have by clicking on browse, it shows me there are two accounts, dreg and Lone Ferret. That is interesting to me. That is of great value to me. This is something I definitely want to look at. Now these clearly look like some kind of a hash. They should actually look very familiar to you. Okay, no questions? They should look very familiar to you from our attacking of the DVWA application when we were looking at the password hashes there. Those look like those old raw MD5 hashes that we saw. And to be fair, we could repeat what we did before. We could copy dreg in those password hashes, we could create a text file, we could save it locally, and we could run John the Ripper with the format is equal to raw MD5 or MD5 raw or whatever the parameter was. But we don't have a huge list. We've got two users, and I am going to take a look and show you something new. Okay? Rather than try and crack these, and by the way, I am now on top of page 6 of the handout. We are very close to being, no, we're not. Oh yeah, we got a bit more to go. I'm at page 6 of the handout at this point. Okay? We're going to do MD5 decryption. MD5 typos will get you. If I search MD5 decrypt, one of the very first results is MD5 online, MD5 decrypt. All right, my search was MD5 decrypt, and one of the very first websites to return was md5online.org. I really like this site. What it gives me is the ability to quickly encrypt strings to get hashes, or try decrypting strings to see if it will quickly decrypt them for me. Again, how did I get here? I searched, come on, catch up, MD5 decrypt, and one of the very first results was the decrypt page for MD5 online. It's a very nice site. It allows us to take some very simple strings, copy them, and see if this site can decrypt them for us. And when we type it in, and its ton of ads, we get right away an indicator that it was able to crack that password. So let's take advantage of that. I'm also going to have a text editor running while I do this activity, because we found that when we copied dereg, we got master spelt unusually. Again, when we tried to crack dereg, or when we looked at dereg, we got that string. When we cracked that string, it gave us master. So we got dereg perfect. And why are we doing this? Because there is a chance that these real looking accounts may be tied to people who are lazy. All right? When we took a look at Lone Ferret, first off, love that whoever Lone Ferret is, they're using Star Wars as their password. Love that. But there is always a chance that these users are just lazy. This is one system. It has SSH. We saw this in our initial scan. They may use the same password for whatever application they're using and to connect to SSH to that machine. Users are lazy, and we need to keep that in mind. Okay? So, let's recap. By using, and I'm halfway down page 6 of the handout where I've captured the usernames, their password hashes, and their unencrypted or their decrypted password strings. Okay? Now that we have that information, we can go back to our environment and we can test them. Okay? I've done a scan, I've run MSF console. This was, what was this? Interesting. Oh, that's where I had my, okay, well, whatever. That was my first scan. I'm not going to get rid of that initial information. That's fine. All right. Control-Shift-T, we're going to open up a fourth one, and we're going to try using the SSH. We're going to try connecting as dereg at Kioptrix3.com. We could, of course, use the IP address. At this point, it really doesn't matter. Because this is the first connection, it is going to say, do you want to download and use this key that's related to this finger, or you want to download and use the fingerprint related to this key? Yes, I want to use this. And it has permanently added Kioptrix3.com to the list of acceptable hosts. And now it wants dereg's password. We've seen it here. We can copy it, double click, right click, copy, and we can go over here, right click, and paste. Doesn't look like it, but of course it doesn't look like it's done anything because it is one of those non-echoing prompts. When I hit enter, however, it does let me log in. Who am I? I'm in dereg's directory, ls-al, nothing here. But, as we have seen, users that reuse passwords in multiple environments are vulnerable, introduce vulnerabilities into the system. Because I was able to realize an exploit, I was able to log in as dereg. Okay, and frankly, I don't even need to relabel my tab here because it explains exactly what's going on. Let's try again, but this time we're going to try and connect as Lone Ferret. So again, SSH Lone Ferret at Kioptrix3.com. And this time I do not need to save it because I've already saved that to my Kali SSH client settings. And again, we can just type this one in, Star Wars, as the password. And again, I am in. I'm in Lone Ferret's directory, ls-al. This time, we actually have a little bit more. This is interesting. We have a .ssh directory. We can start taking a look at that and see if there's some vulnerabilities. But we've got this checksec, which looks like check security shell. Let's take a look at that. We're not going to get anything from it, but let's take a look at it. I don't have the ability to modify it, but I certainly have the ability to read it. All right, root owns it, group root owns it, but the rest of the world can at the very least read the contents of that file. But when we do that, it's just a bunch of stuff. But there is some weird display stuff. There's some weird characters that it's using for some weird encoding in our print statements. So, interesting there. Oh, and by the way, this is not some pseudo shell like we have all the way back here, where we don't have up and down arrow to scroll through my commands. That's simply not an option in our hacked remote shell. That's not the case here. This is a proper SSH, and I can go through. Ooh, sudo ht, that's interesting. This is not a command I typed in. This is a brand new thing. This is the last thing they did. That's interesting. All right, let's take a look. There's also this company policy.readme. Well, let's take a look at that. Double click and paste. Oh, there's that sudo ht command. Hello, new employee. It is company policy here to use our newly installed software for editing, creating, and viewing files. Please use the command sudo ht. Well, we've seen that he has used it. Failure to do so will result in your medium termination, DG. You have to wonder if DG is dereg somehow, whatever. This looks, first off, this looks like it's some kind of forcing security through some kind of process, which is always fraught with risk. All right? Never try and enforce security around some kind of silly process. It's always fraught with risk. Okay? So, first off, we see the sudo command is installed. Brilliant. Let's try it. Sudo su dash. They want the password for Lone Ferret. We know what that is. Star Wars. But we're not allowed to run the bin su as root. All right. So I think the other one is sudo dash h. No, it's not allowing me to do that either. All right. So let's try the sudo ht command. Sudo ht. And right away, we get another indicator of trying to use security through some kind of obscurity. You can't use this because it wants a terminal. The mindset I believe they're trying to convey here is that the average hacker who just says, well, I don't have a 256X term. I don't even know what that means. A lot of people might give up at this point or think that there's something broken or they need something special or special software. And that may be what they're trying to do. But because we understand, we are able to actually take a look at some other tools. Now, in your start menu, or something that we're going to call a start, it's not start. I know it's insulting Ubuntu by comparing this quick launch menu as a start menu. Nevertheless, under the drop-down of applications, there is a system application group. When we select that, there is something called UXterm, which is an Xterm session which has Unicode wrapping around it for environments that need Unicode. Let's see if that gives us what we want. Unfortunately, this is prohibitively small, but as I understand it, you have the ability to zoom in. Please zoom in using the WebEx tool set to this window at this time. Please. Does everybody see that ability to zoom in? Please respond in chat. That way I know people are still awake and actually listening to me. So people are able to zoom in. If you're not quickly Discord with each other on how to do it, I don't have the ability to display it, but there is a zoom feature available to you. I'm glad at least Derek is following along. Doesn't look like anybody else is. Okay, perfect. Thank you, Nelson. So, zoom in. Otherwise, just understand that all of the instructions that we are going to do are in a bottom of page 7, top of page 8, and halfway down page 8 of the handout. It is critical that you look at the image on page 8 of the handout, because to be honest, if you screw up this next step, you have to redeploy the VM. All of the intel you have gathered, which is why we always report, but if you screw up the next step, you're going to screw up your ability to hack this server. Okay, so you must type in the injection, the modification we are going to make exactly correct. Failure to do so will make this will force you to delete this imported VM, re-import it, re-verify the configuration, start up, and try your attack again. A lot of the intel you've gathered is still relative. The username password combos are still relative, but you need to type in the injection correct. And it looks something like this. First off, this is just another shell. This is another shell right here, just like this is a shell up here. I shouldn't move that around because you're zoomed in on it. The shell we had in the background, this is just another shell with a wrapper on it. So we can do the exact same. SSH as lone ferret at kioptrix3.com. It will again ask for the password, and it is Star Wars. Again, I can type in the sudo ht command, because on my sessions, sudo recognizes that I've already typed it in. I do not need to type in this command again. This looks like a text editor. It is a text editor we've never seen before. There's some stuff across the top here. We're really not going to use that. But there are some numbers across the bottom here that we are. These numbers across the bottom correspond to function keys on your keyboard. For example, F2 would save if I had one open. F3 allows me to open a file. And when I hit F3, it says you can open a file. Perfect. So I can do this maybe as root. Let's see if I can't see etc shadow. And I can. So I can start grabbing password hashes if I wanted to. Now I haven't found a lot of luck trying to crack these password hashes. I let it run, and then my computer overheated and then it crashed badly. But that was not related to cracking passwords. It was related to poor cooling. But if you wanted to, you could start stealing these username password combinations and start cracking those passwords, because I'm running this text editor as root. Okay? But that's not what I'm interested in. I want to become root. So I'm going to hit F2 again, F3 again, to open up another file. And the file I want to open up is the etc sudoers. We know there's a file for sudo in this system. We're using it. We know that lone ferret is configured in this file. Let's see if we can't play silly bugger with this. And when I do that, I find right near the bottom of this window where it's open, lone ferret exists. Okay? And we see that lone ferret has been blocked from using the su command. The not means don't run su, which makes sense. But because we can edit this, because we were running this text editor, we can add another command that allows us, we would be allowed to run. For example, I can allow lone ferret, specifically me, to run a shell. Okay, and that's what is highlighted halfway down page 8 of the handout. Please do not forget the comma. Each one of these commands is separated by a comma. You must ensure that if you're going to add a new command at the end of that line, you must also add a comma. That's something that is not highlighted in that image that is on page 8 of the handout. And I can't remember where I got that. I think that was a screen capture from somewhere else. I don't remember where I got that from, unfortunately. I've never been able to get a shell to look like that. Nevertheless, it doesn't matter. The important thing is that you add a comma and an extra command that you want to be able to run. Now that I've made the edit, I can hit F2 to save my work. And please note down here, okay, there's a little asterisk. Every time I make a save, the asterisk disappears. Every time I make an edit, I'm going to hit the space bar, the asterisk comes back. All right, so I'm going to make sure my line ends properly. F2 for save, the asterisk disappears, and then of course F10 to quit. And right away I can test this. I can type in sudo bin sh, and right away you can see your prompt changes. The prompt changes from the string to the hash, usually an indication you have become root, and of course you are. The goal was to become root. In very short order we were able to become root. Thing is now that I've made that change, it applies everywhere. If you can zoom back out, please, to the normal zoom for this screen, you will see that I can become root out of my other shell as well. Are there any questions? Was everybody able to get this working? Perfect. Thank you. Alrighty. That's how we do this attack. I don't know if I'm going to do a competency on this one or not. I don't think I am. I think I'm going to do a competency on K4, but we'll deal with that when we deal with that. If there are no more questions, I'm going to add something to learn, and I'm going to ask you to start working on it today. Okay? There's one thing. Oh, yes. Last thing before I forget. You don't have to do this. I'm doing it for demonstration purposes. This is an edit that we have made. As I have said in the past, if we're doing an attack, a pen test on a local instance of an image, and we're just trying to find vulnerabilities so we can report them, because we always write reports, what we have done here is fine. However, if this is a red team attack where you don't want to leave any indication or evidence of your presence, this is a less than desirable approach. All right? Sometimes we have no choice. Sometimes we simply have to do what we have to do. In this case, we modified a file. Once we were done, whatever we need to do, I would remove that edit from this file before exiting out. Okay? I can always edit this file using this ht command and using this Unicode wrapped terminal editor. I can go back and I can undo this indicator of my presence on the server. If this was a red team activity, that's exactly what I would do. I would not leave this evidence of me successfully attacking this site. Okay? And of course, we do not do black hat activities, so this would not matter in the context of a black hat attack. But if you're doing red team, blue team activities where you have permission to attempt to attack a live system, but you don't want to give any indication of what you're doing, I would remove this after I was done my investigation of this area. Any questions on that? Okay, that was a good hour of conversation. One last time, how is my video correction? How is my audio in today's presentation? I would like some indicators of how the audio went. Was it better than before? The same? Did it fade out at all when I was talking? Audio was better? Okay. Alrighty. Thank you. That's very helpful. I do appreciate that. This is probably the audio setting I'm going to use going forward. Hopefully it recorded well in my video capture software. I'm going to take a look at that video and see, but to be honest, the video that's already in Learn, it did fade some points for you, Darnell? Did anybody else notice that, or Darnell I should say, did anybody else notice fades? Excuse me. Okay, so that may have been your connection, Darnell, or you're just paying attention where others weren't. It's hard to say. Nevertheless, I'm going to keep going forward using to this because more or less I've gotten a positive feedback on it. This is WebEx, and the entire world is trying to use stuff like WebEx these days. So until Cisco has a chance to truly vamp up its infrastructure, we're going to have weird technical glitches such as audio fading. All right, that's it for me, guys. Please pay attention to updated content becoming visible in Learn and an email blast, which you should see in the next 5 minutes or so. Otherwise, we'll see you tomorrow. Please ensure you have the tools in place for tomorrow's class. I'll see you then.